Hello, welcome Mr. Roy to this BW Businessworld special on the budget. In a couple of hours, the finance minister would have presented the budget. She will let out the goodies, I hope so, which will bring happiness and cheer to the 1.4 billion Indians. For our viewers, Mr. Prabal Basu Roy writes for many leading publications, including BW Businessworld. He's a director on the board of large companies and advises chairman and board on governance, on strategy and future direction. He's a very popular commentator on economy and business and has a pulse on what's happening in the business world. So welcome, Mr. Prabal Basu Roy.
Thank you, Annurag.
Forward to the budget. But your opening comments on what do you expect in the budget from the finance minister? A lot has changed since the last time we talked about budget. There is an NDA government. There are coalition partners. You need to integrate the message of continuity, including a leap of faith with continuity. So what should we expect in the budget? What are you expecting in the budget?
Yes. Thank you, Annurag. And thanks to Businessworld for calling me. Well, so that's a good question to set the perspective. So let me give you my take on that. I think being the first budget after the elections, this will be more than a mere statement of account. It will also set the policy direction. At least that's what most of us will look for in it, the policy direction for the next 5 years. And in my view, it will be a reiteration of the economic policies because Nirmala Sitharaman, as I've written before, has done a reasonably good job, I think, in very difficult circumstances from 2019 to 2024 in navigating the economy. So I think reiteration of the economic policies will continue, which is essentially based on few things, which is capital outlay. So therefore, the belief that expenditure multipliers are better than tax multipliers. I think that view will continue. Focused income transfer and welfare support to the poor, youth, women, and farmers. These are the four segments. I think some focused income transfer will happen this time, which will be more than what we have seen so far. The fiscal glide path will continue. We will continue to bank on continued tax buoyancy. And we'll have to take some view on divestment jobs and address the rising inequality. I think that's the thrust of what the broad macroeconomic framework would be. The other thing which is sort of important to recognize here is that in terms of policy, the trickle down is much better than poverty being redistributed. And in that political message has been given and will continue to be given. I think that will be good. But we need to also move to the tested model, from East Asian countries and tested model historically, actually, which is essentially high domestic savings, foreign capital, then capital accumulation, and then finally large, low-wage labor, which moves with basic education, which moves to high exports. I think that model is something which has got twisted in our case because we migrated directly from agriculture to services without going to the manufacturing route. So that hopefully will get corrected at some point, and it's a large one. So low skilled agri labor to urban manufacturing, that route which was overstepped in the last 2 decades, I think that will have to get corrected. Otherwise, there'll be no jobs. I mean, that is the basic issue. And thirdly, with the formalization of the economy in various fronts, I think it will hopefully give rise to jobs too. So that, in a nutshell, is what the economic direction would perhaps be and which I would like to see. Having said that, like you rightly said, there has been an election in between. And that has given some messages, right? So that messages needs to be addressed. I think the biggest message... Yeah, exactly. The biggest message in that, according to me, given the framework which I mentioned, is the issue of reducing inequality. I think that is the biggest message which came through. And this is in terms of across various parameters, Anurag, if you see. So, for example, it is between, let's take the rural gross value adds. Per capita is 73,000 rupees per year for us, for India. For the industry, it is 200,000 per year, 2 lakhs per year. And for services, it is 3,50,000 a year. So you can see the inequality at this level, for example. You can also see the inequality in terms of the need for jobs. South India has enough and more jobs and high-paying jobs, but North India does not, especially UP, Bihar, and certain places of Maharashtra. For example, in Karnataka, where I stay, the per capita for jobs is 450,000 per year, whereas in Bihar, it is 33,000 per year. So that is the level of inequality. So it's across states, across geographical locations. It's
also
across.
There are assembly elections in Bihar. Keep this in mind.
Yes, exactly. And there's this, so across rural industry and services, it's very clear the inequality is actually quite large. And this particular election, to my mind, across the various messages is given is just that. While GDP growth is fine, GDP per capita is just a numerical figure. That's fine too. But where is the median on the GDP? I think that is what is important. So this will get addressed to some extent, at least, because this is important. The second one, which was a big message, I think, from the thing, was that the need for boosting consumption for the middle and lower income groups. High income groups and all that we see. I mean, we have seen various things going around in the media. We know there is huge amount of consumption happening there, but that's a small number. So what happens to the middle and lower income groups? So middle class, of course, we must also acknowledge that per capita middle class was about 86,000, if I remember, when Prime Minister Modi came in. Today, I mean, that inequality has grown. I mean, even though the GDP has grown from $2.2 to $3.6 trillion, that one has grown. And farmers, and as I spoke about farmers and rural economy.
And COVID also accelerated to further grow the disparity.
Exactly. So demonetization and COVID, these are the two big ticket items which actually, killed the SME sector for a large extent. So these are the two things which I think will form the cornerstone of the budget, not compromising the fiscal prudence, which I think will continue, which has been the hallmark of this government, and for the right reasons. So, I think the glide path towards 4.5% by 20.
It won't be a populist budget. It will be a fiscally prudent budget, looking at rural economy, looking at the farmers, looking at job creation, and looking at possibly the elections ahead in states like Maharashtra, in states like Haryana, in states like Bihar, and Jharkhand. So possibly,
and Jharkhand.
It has a lot of balancing to be achieved.
A lot of balancing to be done. The
elephant in the room. There is a talk, if you look at the results of the large FMCG companies, there is a debate or a talk about consumption being soft, especially in the rural sector. There is stress on the rural sector. There is weak employment growth. And though there is low core inflation, and there seems to be apparent high growth in the economy, how do you make sure you turbocharge the rural economy to become the engine of Bharat?
Right. So, as I was mentioning informally also to you, I mean, the core of this dichotomy is essentially because only one of our three levers of growth is working, which is the state capex. In the last 3 years, whatever growth we have seen is because of that. So naturally, that does not percolate down to everybody. It will percolate down over time. But the other two, which is private consumption, as well as private capex
by large players.
Capex and consumption. These are the two which are actually not working at all for quite a while. And unlike in the 2010 to 2016-17 period, where there was no capex, but it was all consumption-led growth, today It's people are living off their savings. Our savings are down to about 6% from 28%. So it's obvious that people are living off savings and people are hurting. People are living off market income from markets, which we can talk about separately. So job creation and growth through investment in labor-intensive sectors like textiles, electronics, etc. That is the key. So to that extent, some extension of the PLI schemes will continue or will be sort of enhanced, for example. Of course, that's a short-term thing. I mean, it's a medium-term thing. So these are the areas where we should actually be looking at. Is the growth coming from job creation and investment in labor-intensive industries? Because unless we move which I talked about from agriculture to manufacturing, nothing will happen to solve these issues. We have gone directly from agriculture to services, unlike the international model. And that is where the crux of the problem is for India today. What is hitting us today is that. So that will have to get done. Yes.
Now, also, today the economic survey has come out. There's been a cautious approach that it seems to have been building for months. RBI and banks have shown concerns about the gap in deposit and credit growth. Also, FD money is being shifted to mutual fund, equities, options, derivatives, trading. How financialization of markets in some of the countries has not ended well for advanced economies. Are you seeing this approach as a precursor to anything big being announced on this front?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, like they say, there I durustai. I had written about this excessive gambling, so to speak, which is happening on the stock markets because of the introduction by the government or by the agencies, but with the regulator, in full knowledge of the regulator, because of what is called weekly option expiry. So the moment you see earlier, we had monthly option expiries. Now we have weekly, and now we have daily. Actually, as of today, we have daily option expiries. Every day there's one option expiry or the other. Now this just actually is synonymous to gambling and nothing else. The moment you have option expiry, people get into it trying to make money, and the people who make money are the option writers and not the option, the buyers. And the retail public is the option buyer. So there's a transfer of funds from option buyers to option sellers. And the option sellers are the big FIs and institutions and the big HNIs and all of that. So this has to stop. And according to me, idea is not to ban FNO trading, because you can't do that. It's a hedging mechanism which you cannot do. You should not do also. But what you can do is make it as it was earlier, which is have option expiries, futures expiries once in a month. So that this daily thing which is happening today has to be stopped, according to me. So I think that is a measure which either will come in the budget or will come later, but the government is going in that direction, and rightly so. I think finally they've woken up, and rightly so. As far as the banks are concerned, listen, I mean, there are different views on this. I don't know whether you know this, but the NIMs, the net interest margin of Indian banks, is the highest in the world. Is the highest in the world at about 3% or something. Today, they are cribbing that people are moving their FDs and moving into the markets or other. No, it's my money, and if I have better products outside, I mean, why will I give it to the banks for 3-4% fixed deposits? There's no point cribbing about it. We come out with better products. Each bank has a brokerage as well. Every bank has a broker. If you come across good products, people will shift money there, like happens in the international market. So, I mean, that part, yes, banks will have a tough time on the liability side to generate funds. But otherwise, banks are in a good shape also. I mean, there is nothing wrong with the banking sector per se, after the write-offs and on the rationalization which has happened. Yeah.
I tell you, Prabal, the PLI has started creating islands of excellence. For example, in air conditioning, Sri City in the south is becoming an island for air conditioning. And hopefully in the next few years, you'll see India really producing totally indigenous air conditioners, right? Because the whole vendor ecosystem is coming. Similarly, if the finance minister had to do something in the budget to nudge the private sector to increase capex? What would be that? Because that increase in capex will create jobs, which then as you know, consumption is directly linked to livelihoods.
Absolutely. So let's step back a minute and talk about corporates in that case, which is something we are very familiar with. So let's talk about corporates. So the corporates today are in pretty good shape, right? And this has happened because of three broad reasons in the last few years. One is the tax breaks which were given in 2019, which was meant for pushing capex actually, which never happened. So that money stayed with the corporates and they did pretty well. So corporate balance sheets are strong. The COVID-related rationalizations happened. So during COVID, there were a lot of rationalizations which happened across industries. So those rationalizations continue till today in many ways. So that has strengthened the balance sheets. Preservation of capital has happened, again, post-COVID. This is a lesson from COVID, which was worked upon. And corporates are focused on liquidity and deleveraging. All this happened from 2019 to 2014. So as a result, corporates are in very good shape. The additional thing which the government is doing for corporates, I mean, this is being done in a slink mode, you can say, or, it's not so apparent, but I'll talk about it, is that pricing power is being given back to the large industries through basically allowing consolidation. And you can see consolidation in cement. You can see consolidation in telecommunications. And the beginning of that has happened in steel to some extent, to very, very limited extent. So you can see the government is moving in that direction and allowing big businesses, industrial businesses, to have pricing power, because once you consolidate, you'll essentially have pricing power. So this is as much as it gets. I mean, how much more can a government or anybody do for that matter? These are very huge. So capex dependent industries, I think consolidation, telecom, cement, more pricing scale, pricing power, that is happening and that will happen. So from the government's perspective, I think corporates now need to respond essentially. They just need to respond. They can very well say that the utilization in the country with the capacity is still at about, aggregate level is about 76, 78% roughly. So there is still some way to go. Now, this is the result of extremely high, it was a policy aberration actually in the 2007 and 8 period, when because of loose money and policies, huge investments took place without a clear payback period in line. So they're actually paying for that. But it's coming to an end now because the 76 to 78% aggregate is reasonably okay to think of capex actually. So cement already is at about 95 plus, so they are thinking about capex. Power is given some estimates about capex being increased, etc. So it will happen. Maybe this year or next year it will happen. The direction will start now, according to me. Yeah.
Thank you, Prabal. Before I bring in my senior editorial colleague, Mr. Arjun Yadav, let me ask you the last. Budgets from this government. This is the Finance Minister, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman's 7th budget. Have also become statement of intent beyond the P&L statement, right?
Yes.
It's a statement of account become like a roadmap, especially the first budget of a third-term government. I mean, it says Prime Minister Modi's third government. Right? Yeah. What would be the headline? If you can predict the headline, what would it be? What would be the big message from the budget?
The big message would be, I guess, continuity.
That's not very oxymoronish. Continuity will change.
It's an oxymoron. Continuity will happen.
Change in what?
Continuity will happen on all the parameters I spoke about in terms of the macroeconomic framework. Yes, because all the 5 things which I mentioned at the beginning. The change would be with respect to targeted subsidies towards these couple of sections of society and addressing
bolder disinvestment.
Yes, disinvestment this year will not happen actually. I mean, even if they might I don't think it will go beyond 50,000 crores because you take time for it to happen. Asset monetization may happen of PSU sector sales, PSU sales. So you'll probably get to 30 to 50,000 crores in that range. It won't be more than that. It won't be more than that.
Prabal, at this point, let me bring in Mr. Arjun Yadav.
Last question, sir. I have some 5 minutes left on my screen, and I want to, carry forward where we left in February when I was talking to you post the interim budget, and at that time,
yes,
we were, pre-election time, and you had mentioned that labor reforms and land reforms is something that you're looking forward in the third term of this government. Any expectation on that front? Any start that could happen?
Yes.
That front from when the budget is presented today?
Yes, Arjun, I'm glad you reminded me of that. I will remind you of a time before that, but Businessworld, I had written for Businessworld for the 2019 budget, before it happened. Similar discussion, but it was in an article. So 2019. So what I had said then was that unless India as a country improves its factors of production, which is land, labor, and capital, we will never be competitive in the external world. And that is the biggest problem which we are facing for our competitiveness side. Our domestic economy is large, but we need exports. Unless we do exports, the money will not come in, which will not go in for investments, all of that. So whilst a lot has happened in these 5 years, I think, in the financial reforms part, which is the capital part, so land, labor, and capital, factors of production. Capital has been addressed through various means in these last 5 years. The other two require attention very fast, which is land and labor. So in my view, land will still face some turbulence because of the political environment today, etc., all of that. So it might not happen so easily. But labor will happen. Labor, I think it's time that labor will happen. But that is related essentially to creating more manufacturing jobs. So it's a circle. It's obviously a circle which, so with more job creation and investment, I think the labor laws will be sort of made more market friendly for private investment to kick in as well. So it is actually linked. So I do expect something on labor, but not so much on land yet.
All right. Thank you, Prabal sir, for your time. That's all the time we have. And in just hours, the finance minister will be presenting the budget, and we hope that it is in line with the direction that that we discussed in the last 30 minutes. And I look forward, for your writing on the post-budget dissection for our magazine as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll do that. All right. Bye-bye. Thank you, Rajan. Thanks very much.